Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and these are your horoscopes for the month of May 2019. So this is the Sun and Rising sign horoscope for Virgos. All right, so let's take a look at what's going on in your chart. The first 10 days of the month are pretty action-packed. I'm going to go through everything that's happening one by one, but it's all also happening at once, as you can see. Look at Mercury in Aries, your ruling planet, at the beginning of the month, moving through squares to Saturn, the South Node, and Pluto, all within the first 3 days of the month, while making a trine to Jupiter in Sagittarius in your fourth house, while also moving through a sextile with mutual reception to Mars in the 10th house. That's so much. That's just 3 days. That's May 1st to May 3rd. This has the feeling to me of a time of trying to strategize and make the best possible decisions while under a lot of pressure. I think the pressure probably stems from work, may have something to do with finances, debt, the feeling of financial burdens or obligations, perhaps money in relationships. May also involve peripheral topics like your children, and home or property. Those are all different house topics involved in all of this. But the overall thing I'm getting is the Saturn square, the Mercury square to Saturn, South Node, and Pluto. It's contractive. It feels like having to make executive decisions, living with consequences, trying to face something and to be real and level-headed about something. If there's excessiveness, to try to cut down. If there is the need to strategize and make big, important, weighty decisions, don't hold back. This is a good window for making serious and powerful decisions, even if they're not easy. And sometimes there's losses under a period like this. And there's, I think if there is any kind of loss that you suffer, there's probably some gain that comes with it because Mercury is getting involved with a trine to Jupiter. Now, when you look forward to May 4th, you're going to see a new moon taking place in your 9th house. That's a house of higher belief, of religion, of spirituality. Sometimes that house is related to the law or the legal system. So the potential for the moon cycle ahead to have a lot to do with you believe spirituality, religion, education, even travel. I think those themes are going to be pronounced in the moon cycle ahead for you. Now, once you go past that, you go to May 5th and 6th. There is a opposition taking place between Mars and Jupiter in your 10th and 4th houses. This has the feeling of a kind of philosophical dialogue, debate, or tension that's taking place between home and family and workplace, and maybe some degree of combativeness around those two things. You're looking at what supports you, what really supports you, versus maybe sometimes just the feeling of if I'm busy enough, then I'll be supported. Or you're also looking at tensions philosophically. What do I want to do with my life versus what substantively supports me, and are the two on the same page? Sometimes I want to go and do X, Y, or Z, but it doesn't really support me. So tough choices again, but also the potential for philosophical sort of combativeness in the workplace or at home. You're not going to see eye to eye with everyone. This month has more of a kind of combustive feeling to it, with a lot of sort of philosophical, intellectual tension. You can see this again on May 7th and the 8th as Mercury goes through a conjunction with Uranus in your 9th house. That's the potential for an epiphany, a mental or intellectual breakthrough, a new technology, a new teacher, a new learning. Something that's maybe very provocative and also destabilizing, sort of intellectually or even spiritually, about that transit. I wouldn't be surprised if you had something to say or do, or something happened at work that was sort of shocking or unexpected, if there was even some unexpected news on that day. Then going forward, between May 6th and the 10th, Venus will repeat the same thing that Mercury goes through from the 1st to the 3rd. Squares to Saturn, South Node, and Pluto, trine to Jupiter in Sagittarius, and starting to form a sextile with Mars in Gemini in your 10th house. I think the only difference that I would say now is that at the beginning of the month, there's a lot of decisions, there's a lot of processing, there's a lot of information, it feels headier. This one feels more relational, where the consequences or actions are directly involved with people, with lives, with relationships, with love, with, difficult, more consequential things happening in relationships. Now, when you go forward from there, between the 10th and the 15th, you're going to see a grand Earth trine forming. In fact, if you go, we'll just go around the 14th in particular, there's going to be a grand Earth trine forming while the sun is also moving through trines from the 9th house in Taurus to the 5th house, Saturn, South Node, and Pluto. And then the 1st house, Moon in your home sign of Virgo on the 14th will hit and almost make a perfect grand Earth trine between the sun, Pluto, and the Moon. This feels very transformational. It feels like the rubber's hitting the road, that, you're putting your money where your mouth is. This is a time of great consequence, meaning you're doing something, you're acting on something, you're implementing something. There's results that come from this. That's what Earth does for us. There's something tangible. It's stemming from an illumination happening in the house of the higher mind, the 9th house, where higher principles are guiding you to make deep transformative decisions, to reform or restructure your life in some way for the sake of greater joy, freedom, creativity, happiness, 5th house things, in relation to your health, 1st house. So it's a very consequential moment for Virgos between the 10th and the 15th, especially that grand Earth trine on the 14th. Now, when you get into the full moon on the 18th, full moon falls in your 3rd house, another house related to the mind and mental energy. And it is, moon is in its fall, while its ruling planet, moon in Scorpio, in its fall. Ruling planet Mars is also in its fall in the 11th house of friends and allies. I think that this full moon has the potential to be about more challenging or emotionally confrontational experiences, either with family members, with siblings, or potentially at work with colleagues, or some combination of all of the above. I do think it's going to be more emotionally vulnerable or difficult period for everybody. I think this full moon is one of the most, if not the most difficult full moon of the year, excluding eclipses, because of the relationship between the moon and its dispositor Mars. I think it's supportive of healing, but I think it's going to be a more painful, heavier, emotionally sort of burdensome full moon for everyone. But that's okay. We're here to learn, right? We're here to grow and learn spiritually. And sometimes we don't grow more than when we're faced with trials and sort of tests in our life. This is one that I think will test you mentally and emotionally. But the good news is that on May 23rd, Mars in Cancer will go through a square to Chiron and Aries in your 8th house. A brush with what we fear is not always bad. A brush with death or mortality is not always bad. Even betrayals or periods of loss or greater, emotional vulnerability, we learn a lot from them. We learn deeper emotional strength. We learn deeper emotional honesty. Chiron, the wounded healer in Aries, is teaching us the value of healthy emotional conflict. It's not all bad. There's something of spiritual value even in difficult emotional periods, which is one of the lessons of this month for everybody. But for you, I think it'll circle back to, especially around colleagues, friends, maybe the work environment, or again, back to family. And I get there's always a possibility this month with a lot of things happening through the 8th house that the topic of money and relationships is also a real source of contention. That's just unique to this month for you. Now, when we get to the 29th and 30th of the month, the last big transit is Mercury in your career house opposing Jupiter in your 4th house. And that is happening at the same time that there is a square from Mercury and Jupiter, basically at the same time, to Neptune in your 7th house. This is the house of career, relationships, and home. So we're talking about the potential for some kind of philosophical transformation or meeting of the minds, and a deeper level of compassion and unity that's possible right now for you in your relationships. And what I'm thinking is that with this one is that something's happening at work that you're going to need the support of your family and loved ones for. And I think that's one big possibility. And at this moment represents an opportunity for synthesis. I would be skeptical of family members who are conditionally supportive of you, meaning I love and support you only if you act or behave in a way that I really want you to act or behave right now, because that could be, I think that could be draining and compromising of your integrity. At the same time, you may need to make some compromises, because it may also be the case that there are needs at home, in relationships, in the family, that others have, that force you to relinquish some degree of focus on your own career, your own activities, right? So there's kind of this feeling of trying to balance the work relationship and family or home dynamics at the very end of the month. The other thing that can happen with this, quite frankly, outside of house topics, just looking at the planets, is learning, education, trying to, finding teachers that are really beneficial, trying to commit to a philosophy that will help you transform or change, the need to speak, teach, educate others, or to find teachers that are helpful, heightened states of intuition or comprehending complex problems, messages and dreams, synchronicities. Mercury, Jupiter, Neptune combination is like, can be very expansive mentally and intellectually. So you could stand to learn a lot at the very end of the month. It might be a very sort of inspiring time for learning. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if there was kind of a component of teaching and learning that you yourself were involved in. I mean, learning from others, fine, but also maybe you have something to teach someone else later in the month. So training as well, like the training, job education, themes like that. So all things to think about. This is what I've got for you for the month of May. I hope this was interesting. Please tell me your stories. Tell me how things go. I'd love to hear from you. Hope you have a great month of May, and I look forward to talking to you all again in June. Okay, take care. Bye.